And welcome back. We had some technical issues there. Apologies for that. I am hoping that we've managed to solve those issues. But please let us know in the chat if there is still an echo. We'll continue as we were. I went to Ed, so we'll go back to Ed just so it makes sense when we edit everything together for the those that want to come in later and watch the video. So, Ed, what have you been up to this week?
Well, I've been sat in my house, Phil. I've ordered some records. I felt that it was time to support some independent retailers, and there's another aspect to that I'll come to in the album of the month thing. I've also ordered a deerskin record, Matt, because I'm having some issues with static, and I fancied something a little bit Hannibal Lecter. If that turns out to be an interesting object, I'll obviously get some pictures of it sorted for the podcast itself. Otherwise, I've been doing some work for you. I've been doing some work for other people, and it's now just blurring into just an endless cycle of lockdown. And I still want to go to the pub. I can't say any fairer than that, really. And I know you're going to tell me that I can't for whatever length of time you teetotalers decide is the case, but I don't care. I want to go to the pub.
Well, I mean, I'd like to get back to the cinema, but I think we're both on the same level there. I think pubs won't open until cinemas open, and I think they're going to be some of the last to actually open up again. So we'll just have to hang tight, Ed, and see how things pan out. Now, Kaz, you were telling us about climbing up the wall before we went into Echo City there, and I'm just checking the chat, and everybody's saying that it sounds much better now. So that's good.
It.
So hopefully that's fixed. So Kaz, you were saying you're a little bit stir crazy at the minute.
Yeah, I think the bad weather was not great for anyone. I mean, even chatting to some friends, not being able to get out and about, do any exercise or do anything, or even just look outside and see that it's a nice day. I mean, I'm glad that the sun's back, and I hope it stays for a little bit longer.
You've had sun today. I've been dreadful here.
No, I've had thunder and lightning. Very, very frightening.
Then I am extra special lucky. But
yeah.
Yes. So I think that's made a difference to everyone's mood, certainly in the house, and I think it's just easier. There's a little bit more freedom. Don't feel quite as cooped up.
Okay, good stuff. So that's everybody catched up. That's not even a word, Phil. That's everybody caught up. So, yeah, competitions. Kaz, tell us all about them.
Sure, we got winning copy of 21 Bridges on Blu-ray. That closes 6th of May. Copy of Preacher, the final season on Blu-ray. That also closes 6th of May. A copy of Elephant Man Limited Edition 4K Blu-ray. That closes 13th of May. Copies of Criterion's May titles on Blu-ray. That closes 19th of May. And a copy of Sea Fever on Blu-ray, which closes 2nd of June, and I highly recommend that. I'll come back to that later. You can also win a Yamaha YAS 109 simple all-in-one soundbar. That closes 21st of May. All competitions open to eligible AVForums members resident in the UK.
And you're not reading that. Any previous competition winners?
No, there's an extended time on some of these competitions. It will probably pull some as they start to close next week.
Okay, so we'll be back in a sec with some hardware reviews. So it's hardware review time, and we've actually got 3 reviews to get through this week, but I'm going to be quick with what I'm going to talk about because it's the BenQ. No, I promise I'm going to be quick. It's a BenQ TK810 4K DLP projector. This is probably what's best described as a multimedia projector. It's certainly not a home cinema projector. Black levels far too high, lots of shadow detail. Non-existent, not there. Watching anything in scope, the black bars are the same as the as what's in screen, which is dark grey. So when you get a difficult scene with lots of blacks and shadows, and where you should have a nice depth to the image, completely flat. Contrast was, I think, around about 400 and something to 1. So the review is up on the site. It's a multimedia projector. It has lots of fancy things if you like, screen mirroring your phone and watching YouTube videos, and you want to watch that on a bigger screen and all the rest of it. It's 1,100 quid. If I was a movie fan, I had 1,100 pounds burning a hole in my pocket, I think you're better with a 55-inch OLED, which you could pick up for round about that kind of money, a B9 or even a C9. I think if you could stretch to 1,200, 1,300 pounds, you can pick up a C9 at the minute. So it's for somebody that likes 3D movies, big screen gaming, although it was 80 odd milliseconds lag time, so you're not that quick a gamer if you want this. It's finding an audience for this. Projector's difficult. BenQ makes some really good products. It's well built, even though it's plastic. It's well built, it's well put together, it's going to last being moved around from house to house or room to room and so on. There's just better devices out there. However, saying that, everything that it claims it can do, other than HDR, but projectors can't do HDR. So yeah, it's I give it a 7 out of 10 because it does what it says on the tin, does what it promises to do, but it's not really a home cinema projector for anybody that's serious about home cinema. Even though I gave it a recommended, it was recommended on the fact that it does what it says it's going to do at the price point.
So Phil, just very quickly, the YouTube bit, does that mean it's on your network in its own right?
The YouTube bit? Oh, you mean screen mirroring? It's just using iOS or Android.
Right.
So doing that on the network. So you just sign it into the network, and then you can use AirPlay or Android or whatever. It does have an app store, but I found the quality of the applications in terms of video quality was pretty poor in terms of compression and so on. I found it better quality streaming from a mobile device or just using another input source. There is a USB 3.0 on the rear, which is a dedicated media player. So if you've got a thumb drive or whatever with video clips, you can use that as well. So it is a multimedia projector. If you're into serious home cinema, not for you guys. I'm reviewing a more interesting BenQ at the minute, which is the step-up model on the 850 from last year. It's actually called the 851. So it's one better. So that review coming up in the next week or so. So that's me finished. If you want to read the review, it's on the forums. If you want to see the video, it's on our YouTube channel. So Steve, you've been looking at another TV, you lucky boy.
Yeah, Samsung Q95T, which is this year's flagship 4K model. Now, basically last year, there was no real difference between the flagship 4K and the flagship 8K, apart from obviously one having an 8K panel, the other one having a 4K panel, and understandably most people just bought the 4K version because it was cheaper. So this year Samsung decided to try and make more of a differentiation in order to drive sales in the direction of 8K TVs. Having said that, actually having now spent some time with the 95, I can say that there's not a massive difference, obviously apart from the panel. So there's no 8K panel, of course, and the upscaling doesn't include the AI 8K upscaling, which I have to say is phenomenal. Still good, but not quite as good because obviously it hasn't got as many pixels to play with. And it doesn't have object tracking sound plus. So instead of having speakers at the top, middle, and bottom, it's got them at top and bottom. There's no middle speakers. But other than that, it's not massively dissimilar. Now, it's not slimline. So unlike the 950 TS, which is 15 millimeters deep. This is about 25 millimeters deep, so it's deeper. Does still have the One Connect box there, which I absolutely love. It's a shame that it's not being used as much this year as in previous years, I suspect, because it's quite expensive to do. But certainly, I think the G10 would have definitely benefited. The LG G10 that I was reviewing last week would have benefited from having a One Connect box, because then you'd have had one cable going to the TV. So I love that, and that's still included on this. And overall, it's a great TV. I've got to say, one of the things I was really curious about was the local dimming, because the big difference between the Q95 this year and the Q90 last year is there are less local dimming zones. I counted 120 on this TV. I think last year it was just under 500. I think it was 488. So there's less zones for it to play with, but I was impressed to see that the local dimming was still really good. Now, Samsung's local dimming has always been excellent, very well implemented, and even though it's got less zones to play with, because it's so well implemented, it still works really well. And in fact, I actually put on, there's a scene in First Man when the crew of Apollo 11 first go into the shadow of the moon. It's a great scene for testing local dimming, because basically the whole screen goes black, and then you can see through the window of the command module the lunar surface light up, and it lights up their faces, and it can be quite difficult. It's something that OLED does really well for obvious reasons. It's self-emissive, but with local dimming, it can be quite tricky. And in fact, when I was reviewing the Q950 TS, that was still using an early version of the local dimming, and it didn't handle that scene particularly well. I'm glad to see that Samsung listened to the feedback, because it did that scene really well on the Q95. So that was great. And overall, in terms of its performance, out of the box, pretty accurate, very accurate after calibration, both in SDR and in HDR. If you're a gamer, the input lag is less than 10 milliseconds, it's 9.4 to be precise. Peak brightness was 1,700 nits on 10% window. For HDR, that's in the movie mode. It does have filmmaker mode, but at the moment you can't manually select it. They are going to add that at some point, but at the moment you can't. So it would only go into filmmaker mode if it received the metadata, the flag. But since no content's currently got that, as I was saying last week about the G10, it won't go into filmmaker mode at the moment. But apparently it is there. I have no way of checking or testing for that, but apparently Samsung said it does have filmmaker mode, but we're going to add an actual manually selectable mode on top of the current modes of standard, dynamic, natural, and movie at some point in the future. Don't ask me when, I don't know, but that's what they're planning on doing. So looks good, sounds good too. The sound quality was really good. I mean, it's not as thin as the 95 TS, but it's still a really attractive TV. Same basic design, just a bit deeper. And overall, great TV. A really good TV, and yeah, I think if you're looking for a 4K TV, then and you want an LCD TV, then this is definitely worth looking at. Obviously, you might want to consider the Q800T, because then you're going to get an 8K panel and you get the AI 8K processing upscaling as well. But I think it's a 4K panel. It's really good.
Steve, what is the differences between the models this year compared to Samsung's 4K models last year? They could be accused of dumbing down the line, but basically what they're now saying or suggesting is that their 8K TVs are the top of the line TVs now.
Yeah, absolutely. This year they're trying to make it very clear that the flagship TVs are the 8K TVs. So your 950, the 900, and the 800. But there's obviously still, a wide range of 4K TVs, but there are differences. Last year there wasn't, between the 90 and the 900 or 950, there was no difference other than the panel, obviously, and some of the upscaling. But this year there's more differentials, like I say. But actually, if you look at it, the differences aren't massive. I mean, basically, you lose two speakers in the middle, and it's not quite as thin, and obviously it hasn't got an 8K panel. But in most other respects, it's the same. It's the same tyres and platform, which, as it stands right now for 2020 TVs, is the platform to have, because it's got everything, including the UK catch-up TV services. And they've done a few little tweaks there in terms of, I think it's a nice design now for tyres. And it used to be a white screen. It was a bit blinding if it happened to be an HDR at the time. Now it's got like a pale blue background instead, which is a lot easier on the eyes. But yeah, it's a great package. And even though there are differences between the 8K and the 4K TVs, they aren't massive. And so I don't think the big difference basically is the number of dimming zones.
They were telling me at CES when we were getting a look at the 8K screens that they were going for accuracy this year, Steve, and it's something that we have accused them of not following with their HDR setup. They always are a little bit too bright when it comes to following the PQ EOTF, the ST2084 standard. Are they doing that better this year?
Yeah, they absolutely are. They've addressed that, and now they're tracking the PQ EOTF much closer than they basically pretty much bang on, which is something they weren't doing. Previously, they tended to deviate from it. In order to get it back to it, you had to bring the contrast control down a bit to 45, I think, from 50. This year, they track accurately out of the box.
And what about colour volume? Because this is where LCD really can stand up against OLED. OLED doesn't have great colour volume, whereas I would imagine that they should have.
Yes, absolutely. That is the big difference between OLED and LCD. It's got a much larger colour volume than LCD because obviously it's just overall it's brighter. Now, obviously the OLEDs have a more precise delivery in terms of peak highlight, specular highlights, because they're doing it at a pixel level, and you can never replicate that with an LCD TV with a local dimming backlight. But their overall image is brighter, so that gives them a much larger color volume compared to an OLED TV, and that can make a big difference when you're watching HDR content.
Okay, good stuff. And the review is going to be live when, Steve?
This week, I suppose. Well, it's up to you, isn't it? You want to put them up. I don't care.
You have to get the review to me, so that was a kind of roundabout way of me asking you when you're going to give me the review to publish.
Tomorrow.
Okay, right. That suits me. Ed, funnily enough, you've been looking at some hi-fi. Tell us all about it.
Yes, I've been looking at the Neat Ministra. Now, we've reviewed a few speakers from Neat. I've reviewed a few speakers from Neat for AVF over the years, and for the most part, they've all been weird. Years ago, I did the IOTA, which is probably the smallest speaker I've ever tested for AVForums. Then I tested the IOTA Alpha, which was taking a tiny stand mount speaker and turning it into a floor stander that did look a little bit like a pedal bin, but sounded amazing. And now, finally, I'm reviewing something which is almost normal. As the picture has just popped up, it's a two-way stand mount, but it is still absolutely chocker with things that make Neats neats. Where you see one bass driver on that, there are in fact two. It's an isobaric speaker, a little bit like the Kudos Titan that I reviewed a little bit of time ago. The only difference being the Titan is a counter-firing isobaric. This is a sequential isobaric. Both drivers point in the same direction. This is then partnered with a ribbon tweeter, and I think that makes it the only speaker we've ever tested with this particular configuration. The black finish of the review samples doesn't do the speaker too many favors. There's an oak and a walnut finish, and they do look a hell of a lot better because they set up, they demonstrate more sort of readily that the baffle is a separate color to the rest of the cabinet. And I have to say, this is an absolutely outstanding loudspeaker. It's not the easiest one in the world to drive. You'll need to have a reasonable amount of power and a reasonable, a reasonable level of quality to that. But the overall levels of performance it delivered were fantastic. Interestingly, I decided to review this because we got a number of very positive comments from forum members who'd been to the Bristol Sound and Vision show. It kept on cropping up as some of the one of the favourite products of that they listened to at the show. And yes, completely agree. It's a really, really impressive product. It's going to be an interesting point of comparison because sat in front of me at the moment and will be going up in the next tranche of reviews is the latest PMC equivalent. So that's the 2521i, which in true PMC fashion doesn't capitalize all the things it's supposed to and makes Word explode in a world of fury every time you type it in. I'll be honest with you, I'm a huge Neat fan. I genuinely expected the PMC to be comfortably better, not least because it's a little bit more expensive. It's £2,000 flat, whereas the Neat is 1,800. In fact, it's a much more nuanced decision between the two. I've tried to do my best to explain the differences between them. The PMC uses a transmission line instead of an isobaric to get a bit more bass out of roughly the same size cabinet. I think the PMC is fractionally better looking, but there's not that much in it, and neither of them are exactly speakers you want to paint pictures of. But they are a demonstration that there's some seriously good sort of speakers cropping up at this price point, and they deliver a level of performance which is more than the sort of meat and two veg bonuses you would expect over £1,000 stand mount. Both of these, particularly in terms of their bass response, and then in the Neat as well in terms of their upper frequency response as well, just absolutely outstanding products. If you are interested in either of them, as I say, the Neat comes in more attractive finishes. PMC is supplied in a variety of them. Both manufacturers have asked, as small British concerns, if for whatever reason you are shopping around for either of these products, they are in limited production at the moment. But obviously the nature of supply issues with all manner of product components that go into them, there will be delays in getting hold of some of these products at the moment. They're asking you nicely to bear with them, and as soon as things have improved, they'll obviously do more to get more of them out there and into stores.
And the review is going to go live when, Ed?
Well, that's in the tank. It's entirely up to you as to when you want to put it up there. This is one from my last set of reviews. You do astutely note that I haven't yet uploaded the April reviews, even though it's May the 3rd. That'll be happening early next week. I'm just finishing off some stuff now, but I figured that you had some ones spare, so I had to prioritise bailing somebody out on another publication. Let's leave it at that. Do I get to say this because I was talking at the time, or did Phil? Do you want the honours on this one?
On what, Ed? You have to explain.
McLean21 has donated £5.
Woohoo!
Well, so thank you ever so much for that. That's magnificent. It does feel ever so slightly like I'm doing a telethon on a news,
Yeah,
but no,
hit the bell, Steve.
Ring the bell, like if you can,
Subscribe.
And subscribe.
But thank you ever so much. It's genuinely appreciated. So, and just whilst I forget, someone else popped in the column in the comments earlier that I should stop slouching. It's Sunday evening and I'm drinking and I'm sat on a sofa. I'm not going to not slouch. I'm sorry. Slouching is part of the package.
You got to get through all that wine as well behind you, so that's a headache tomorrow morning.
Yeah, don't worry.
I'm just going to bring up the sound quality again. Obviously, this is the first time we've done the podcast. We did the test on Thursday night. We are expecting the odd issue now and again. So apologies if it is sounding a little bit echoey out there, and especially if you're listening back to the audio version. We'll try and clean it up for the recording when it goes out tomorrow, so it should sound a little bit better. But if you're listening live, thanks for sticking with us. We are trying very hard to. Well, Stuart is, because Stuart's behind the scenes at the minute, trying to figure out what's going on with this. It's new to us.
It's like technology. Star Trek: The Next Generation. He's surrounded by sparks. He keeps on shaking from side to side.
It's the wizard behind the curtain.
Yeah. At this point, just before we go into, because obviously it's the end of the month, so Ed's going to do his final album playlist. I just want to quickly go through. Ed, will you be reviewing any KEF speakers this year?
I hope to. The thing about it is that I managed to generally miss new release points for KEF speakers for reasons entirely down to their own. They often prioritise the print magazines over the websites. But nevertheless, I've looked at some of the R series speakers for, ironically, for home cinema choice. But I thoroughly enjoyed that. So yes, I will speak to them once the world returns to equilibrium, and we'll see what we can get squared away. The other big difference, I suppose it's worth pointing out, is that regular listeners will know that I've spent 18 months living in unique accommodation. Let's leave it at that. I'm now obviously back in a normal house, and that makes a huge difference. Indeed, in the tranche of reviews that will be uploaded next is the first floor stander review I've done for AVForums in 2 years, because it wasn't practical to review them in my shed.
I think I've done more than you have in the last 2 years.
Yes, I think that's a fair assessment. So I have done my first floor stander review for AVForums in donkey's years, and that does open the gates to doing a few more of them, provided that my spine holds up.
All right, thanks for your question. Who asked you that one? It was Gordon Wheeler. Thank you, Gordon, for your question here on the KEF. So you've had your answer. And I also noticed there was somebody looking in from the US. Luke, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. And I would like to say hello to the listener from France, but there's no way I can make out what your username is there, so sorry about that.
And there's one from Greece as well, so we're truly an international mob.
Good stuff. Right, so like I say, it's end of the month, so we've just heard him do a speaker review, but I'm going to ask him to do his vinyl albums and playlists. I think is really important at the moment. I've been finding so much new music through suggestions that Ed's given me, and then I've gone off down rabbit holes following on from that, and I've found quite a few suggestions to ping back at Ed. Some of them you'd already sent to me and I've forgotten about.
Yeah, but that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? Especially as a lot of the stuff that we're listening to, it's not exactly memorable names. So no, that's an issue. Right. True to form, because as I say, this whole thing is ambitious but rubbish. I was supposed to hold up a record in front of the camera, but I've forgotten to bring it with me. As said earlier on in what we've been doing, I've bought myself some more records recently. But nothing new this month has turned up yet. So I'm going to backtrack slightly. Record of the month was something that I briefly alluded to earlier on, in an audio podcast. Third album by the Slow Readers Club, Manchester band. It's really very, very good indeed. One of the reasons I'd flag it up as a vinyl release, firstly, it's bright pink. It's one of the most vividly coloured pieces of record, vividly coloured pieces of vinyl, rather, that I've tested in quite a long time. It's also an instance where, because records simply won't take the level of headroom abusing that the digital files will, it does genuinely sound better than the digital file. So it's well worth a look if you've got the means of doing that. The album is called The Joy of the Return. It's been out for a little while. Now, this feeds into something I'm going to flag up with a couple of the other releases this month. Bands, smaller bands especially, are suffering at the moment. Gigs are a huge part of their income, and they're just not happening. If you are buying music, and it doesn't matter whether it's download, CD, or vinyl, Google search the album. The chances are it will bring up a band website, and you can order direct from them. I'm not saying it's going to make them a huge amount more than it is going through one of the Enormo websites, but it's probably going to help. This is specifically the case if the artist has a Bandcamp site. American Pie alliterations aside, Bandcamp is a direct to market method of getting material to getting artists selling material to listeners. This Friday just gone, Bandcamp waived all of their fees, so anything you ordered off their website went 100% to the artist, and they're doing a couple of these, and they do make press of them when they happen. So just keep an eye on it. And as I say, there's a choice between physical media, lossless files, sometimes high res as well, or if you just want the compressed one, they're available too. Which brings me on to album of the month. Now, there's 3 albums I'm going to flag up, but the album of the month, I haven't sent this to Phil because I know it's pretty much not up his alley whatsoever, but it's an American artist called Peter Oren, and it's called The Greener Pasture. Now, I need to be abundantly clear, this album is not a laugh a minute. The topics involve factory farming and our overdependence on technology. So, yeah, it's not one to listen to if you're already feeling a bit down. I'll cover that in a bit. But nevertheless, as a piece of musicianship, it's off the clocks. Absolutely phenomenal. It's available on Bandcamp. There is a limited edition record, which I'm looking at, and there's a crushing inevitability that I'm going to buy, even though it's quite expensive. But nevertheless, for sane and normal people, there's a perfectly affordable lossless download. It's on all the major streaming services as well, so you can have a listen before you buy, of course. Slightly cheerier, but still very quirky, is Fiona Apple. She's been doing weird albums for years. She once had the record for the longest album title that had commercially charted anywhere, and I can't even remember what it is because it is several dozen words long. This album is just more snappily called Fetch the Bolt Cutters, and it's really, really good. I'm not going to lie, some of her earlier work didn't necessarily grab me, but this is a fantastic listen. Quirky, imaginative, cracking songwriting, and she's a hell of a performer. So yes, very, very good. Finally, if you're looking for something a bit cheerier, Thievery Corporation have released an album called Symphonic, which plays and riffs on the standard sort of things that Thievery Corporation does, sort of down-tempo, smooth, engaging. And fundamentally, it's compared to the 2 albums I've just listed, it's something that happens in the background, but it should still cheer you up, work lovely as a thing to have on whilst you're trying to desperately get some work done, and so on and so forth. Paul Newcomb, in response, streaming often leaves me overwhelmed by choice. It leaves everyone overwhelmed by choice. Your best bet is to focus on an artist you like, deep dive, and just try and avoid being distracted off into the related artists and so on and so forth. Really experiment with and listen to stuff that the artist has done, which crops up on YouTube and their live albums and so on and so forth, and get a real handle on what they do, and then from there start looking at related artists. And then if you're really scratching for things to do, as I say, there's my 50 albums to experiment with, which will be going up on the site sooner rather than later. And then finally, playlist of the month, Cobuzz has done piano and electric flavors. The isolation playlist that I did for the article, which is already up on the site, again, conscious of the fact that for every person that's furloughed, there are some of us who are still sort of trying to work in slightly bizarre circumstances, often with family members bombing around. This is a really, really excellent playlist for music to sort of, I'm going to use the words drown out your family, which sounds terrible, but nevertheless has a certain merit at the moment. So there's some really good listens there. It must be said, congrats to all the streaming services. They are far from key workers, but a number of them really have stepped up to the plate in terms of what they've been doing with content, in the knowledge that most people are squared away at home at the moment. They have been releasing some interesting stuff and just putting a bit of effort in. So very grateful for that.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying myself listening to music, because obviously, like I was saying last week, the shops downstairs are closed because of the current situation. So I've got loads of time to spend with music, and I've been experimenting and so on. So Paul Newcomb, if you need anything else, then all you need to do is befriend Ed on Skype and just keep asking him for recommendations like I do. And it's good. It's a great way to find new music. You don't need Spotify to tell you. You just get Ed to tell you, and then go and find the stuff. Right, so that wraps up our hardware section and the best of the month when it comes to vinyl albums and playlists. We'll be back in a second with cars and some movies. And so we're back for the movie section of the podcast, and as always, Kaz is going to tell us what's happening. Not a lot happening, actually, when it comes to film releases. As you can imagine, if the film studios aren't producing anything at the moment, then you can guarantee they're not releasing much. So I think we could skip past the film releases, Kaz, I think, and move on to films of the month. And again, with cinemas being closed and not a lot of A-list titles out there, what can we look at in terms of films of the month?
Well, my favourite films of the month are actually both animated features, which was a surprise to me on both counts. So Spies in Disguise is the Will Smith one. I did actually review it on release, so I won't go over it too much. Suffice to say that I thought it was absolutely hilarious. It's the one where he gets turned into a pigeon. And I saw the trailer, didn't expect much, and then picked it up on digital and really enjoyed it. So it gets pushed up there with the caveat that there isn't a great deal out there at the moment. It gets pushed up there to the top of the pile of films of the month. And the other one, again, a big surprise, Mortal Kombat: Scorpion's Revenge. Not being a huge Mortal Kombat fan, never really played the game, and wasn't expecting anything from it. Tremendous, violent, visceral fun. Both animated movies, both up as my films of the month.
Okay. I haven't seen either of those, but I've got to say I've been struggling to watch new content. But an interesting one that you've picked for your film review this week, because it's actually a low-budget affair, but actually I had a look at the trailer and my interest piqued. I might actually check this one out.
So yeah, that's Sea Fever, which is an Irish independent production. I think it's co-production with Belgium as well, but I'm going to call it an Irish independent cinema production. It's very low-key, all set largely on a fishing boat, and but they managed to somehow work with relatively limited effects to produce something that is like a B-movie riff on The Thing and The Abyss. Now, don't expect big, grandstanding, epic set pieces or anything quite as memorable as those, but it's still nice to have an indie production that resonates well enough to give hints of both. And perhaps the biggest surprise is that it works as something of an analogy for the current pandemic. As well, I won't spoil too much, but as things develop on the boat, it's a little bit like the situation that's unfolded in the very real world. So it's a very prescient movie, unexpectedly so, probably from the production dating back to last year, unless they knew something we didn't. But it's well worth checking out. Small cast. I think the lead is Hermione Caulfield, who you might recognise from the very start of Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. She's runs the record store that and talks to Tom Cruise before meeting her fate. She was also in Star Wars: The Last Jedi. She's a good lead in it. There's also Connie Nielsen, who was in Wonder Woman, and Dougray Scott. So I recommend it.
Quite a good cast.
It is, yes. I didn't expect it. I expected kind of nobody, but they put together a cast. They were actually I think they were going to cast Renee Zellweger in the Connie Nielsen role, and I'm really glad they didn't, because Connie Nielsen plays it a little bit less likely to grandstand in the situation, and it's a nicely, sussily played little indie flick. Recommended.
And where can we catch this, Kaz?
Digital. So I think it's out day and date with Blu-ray as well. But for those who can't pick it up easily on Blu-ray, and I'm not going to pop into HMV, but you can probably order it from Amazon. It's digital and disc at the moment. I don't think there's actually a DVD release. It's a rare one, which is getting either Blu-ray or digital. Okay,
we were going to move on to the disc releases, but having had the massive Star Wars releases and everything else, the taps have run dry. We've got nothing this week on 4K or Blu-ray, so we're going to move swiftly on to our discs of the month, and there's quite a few to actually choose from that are really good quality AV discs. Films are sometimes questionable though, although I've got to say there's two absolute crackers in there, and a collection as well. So let's go through them. One that really did surprise me, it's the only one on the list that I've actually seen in my own home cinema, but the audio quality was fantastic. Video was pretty good as well, and that was Rise of Skywalker. We won't go into the film, you know our thoughts on the actual film, but in terms of presentation, it's what you expect from Lucasfilm, to be honest. Absolutely spot on there. Soundtrack needs to be about 5 dB, a lot higher than your normal, but everything's there. It's a nice dynamic soundtrack, nice use of effects and so on, and really takes you into the movie. So that, by default, is my disc of the month, even though it's not a great film. Steve?
I'd probably go with Jumanji: The Next Level. For overall picture, sound, and it's a fun movie.
Yeah.
The Star Wars collection, I'll let Kaz talk about that. But yeah, of the movies that I actually saw it earlier than this month, but yeah, from the stuff that came out in the last month, I'd say Jumanji: The Next Level is definitely worth getting. It's a good fun movie, not quite as good as the one before because it's kind of more of the same, but picture and sound wise, it's top draw.
I thought they did really well with it in terms of being a film. The next, I liked the play on the characters and swapping characters and so on. I thought it was really, really, really funny, and it just points out how good the actors actually are in the movie. I thought it was really good. So it's nice to see it's a good disc. I'll pick it up eventually. It's not one I'm going to rush out or it's definitely going to rush out.
You don't rush out for anything.
It's not one I'm going to buy on Amazon anytime soon. The Star Wars collection, like I said a few weeks ago, I have no intention of buying that, and we still don't know if they're coming out as separate releases in the UK. There's been no announcement of that so far, and we don't know if Kaz's choice, assuming this is your choice, Kaz, is coming out on 4K disc either, and that's Rogue One.
Yes. So, I mean, I love the Star Wars collection, and it was nice revisiting it. As controversial as it proved to be, I really enjoyed going back over all of the old films, but it was a fatal flaw not to do a full collection. I know they call it the Skywalker collection, and I know they're trying to rinse more money out of us, but I think a part of me had forgotten it was called the Skywalker collection and just expected to get Rogue One. So I was shocked, and then doubly shocked again when I realized the UK hasn't even got Rogue One on their horizon. So I went out and picked up the US release, which I assume Steve already has.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tremendous disc. I think it's a highlight of all of the Star Wars movies in pretty much every shape and form.
It's still my second favourite Star Wars film.
Well, it's a strong contender for being controversial here, my favourite, because everyone loves Empire, but I've always had a little bit of an issue with it being the middle of three films.
Solely Empire is that because I saw it under the age of 10 first. That's probably the only genuine advantage it offers.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rogue One just finally nails it, depicting a Vader who's serious, menacing, and powerful, and not cumbersome and lumbering, nor deeply CG, and depicting stormtroopers who aren't inept, and a battle-scarred rebellion of people who'll do whatever it takes to survive. I mean, it's a properly good war movie, which is arguably what Star Wars has always needed.
Yeah.
So
the thing is, though, you take Vader at the end of that, and then a few hours later.
Yeah.
I
mentioned that in the review that once you've watched Rogue One Vader, it's very difficult to see how he's had a bit of a.
He clearly started drinking heavily after the ship escape. And he's just been on one since that point.
Yes, I mean So I think that's my disc of the month. It only just arrived, and the review will be up for maybe May the 4th be with you tomorrow. But that's my disc.
You can't say that. Disney owns that now.
What, May the 4th be with you?
No,
You said it twice.
Did you not see the tweet? Yeah.
Hashtag.
Disney owns your soul.
Is that it then?
Yeah,
okay.
That's it.
That's a shame.
To be fair, they've owned my soul for a while now, haven't they, really?
Well, your deals are your own with us, but yeah, fine. Yes, I take it. I take your point, but it was in terms of reminding everyone that, broadly speaking, they're just evil. I say evil. Broadly, it was a reminder that there's very little joy or leeway left in these things. So I don't know if they deleted the tweet. They did sort of pedal
They
back.
tried to backpedal quite rapidly, but damage was done.
Yes.
Right. We're getting through this really quite quickly because there's not a lot to talk about movie-wise, but obviously we've got TV and streaming, which is always a big category. So we must have at least 5 or 6 things coming out this week, Kaz, on streaming.
Not really, and we're dredging it a little bit with this. This is Harley Quinn season 1, the animated series. I mean, I haven't seen it yet. I've seen the trailer. It looks quite good fun. That's finally coming to E4. It's been out for US forum members for a while, but it does look quite fun. But there isn't a great deal else. I'm sure that Steve's going to correct me. Steve, hit me with some extra streaming that I've missed.
No, I don't think there's anything, surprisingly. Maybe it's just as well because we've been inundated with stuff recently, but it seems to have quietened down in the last couple of weeks. The only thing I would mention is Trying, which is on Apple TV, about a couple who are trying to adopt, with Rafe Spall and Esther Smith, that I really enjoyed. It dropped on the whole lot, all 8 episodes, unusually for Apple TV, dropped on Friday. And it's funny and charming, and they're great together. They've got good chemistry, and they're a charming couple of leads, and it's very funny at times, and it's beautifully shot as well. It's shot around Camden, presumably last summer, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, it's worth checking out.
I think this is reflective of the fact that right now, outside, full stop, just looks fantastic. The idea of being able to wander around it uninhibited. They could probably do some feature shots of Cumbernauld, and I'll be going, oh yeah. Mm.
No, but when you see people now like in close proximity and holding hands and cuddling and kissing, you think like, oh, don't be doing that. It's funny how quickly that seems strange. It's like seeing someone smoke in a restaurant or a bar, which just looks weird now when you see it. Someone doing it in an older film or TV series because no one's done it for such a long time. Now you've seen people.
It just proves that social conditioning works if it's done right, and you keep repeating the same messages over and over again. So anyway, that's we're almost up to the question points. So if you do have questions, now's the time to.
Are we not doing our TV programs at the moment?
We are, but I'm giving everybody a heads up that we're coming on to questions. So you have another drink, Ed. So we're coming up to questions soon. We're going to do a final discussion point, and that is TV and streaming of the month. My pick here, because I haven't seen the other 2 yet, I haven't got round to the other 2 that's on the list here that the guys have picked, but Westworld Season 3, I've been really quite surprised with it. I've been annoyed with it at times, but overall, I'm really enjoying the future world. I'm not completely caught up to this week, so I think I'm 2 back or maybe even 3 episodes back from where other people might be at this point, so no spoilers. But Yeah, really enjoying it. The acting's always spot on. The production values are absolutely spot on. Even though I'm watching it on Sky in HD through Sky Q, it looks pretty good. I'm watching it on the projector. I mean, obviously, it's compressed to hell, as most Sky stuff is, but I think it'll do. Absolutely. And I'm liking it, Steve. I'm assuming that you're catching up with it as well.
I am, although I think it was last week I watched it. So there's 8 episodes in this season, so I was watching episode 6, and I suddenly thought, have I missed it? I realised I hadn't seen episode 5 halfway through. I thought, what the hell is going on? I realised I somehow had missed an episode, so I just stopped, watch episode 5, then watch episode 6. I'm really enjoying it. It's actually, it takes place in the real world as opposed to Westworld or other worlds, it's bringing in some really interesting ideas in, and I think it's definitely an improvement on season 2, which kind of just treaded water a lot of the time, I felt. But this time they've gone into some really interesting subjects, and it's all starting to make sense. And I'm looking forward to the last episode, which is tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's starting to make sense because we're now getting a picture of the actual world that we're in. Because up till now we've made our own assumptions of where we think this world is and these theme parks and all the rest of it, and now we're getting the bigger picture, as it were. And that's what I'm finding really, really interesting. So yeah, highly recommended. If you haven't started season 3 yet, it's worth your time and effort. Although I think probably the opening episode's probably gone now from Now TV, is it? It's normally about 30
they're
days.
all still there.
I think
sometimes they give
it's
it
a marquee release, so they're not doing anything stupid with it.
You say that.
Well, no, I do say that out of childish
They did it with
optimism.
Game of Thrones, didn't they? And then brought back the box sets 3 months later, just to get you to re-up. I'm actually way behind on Westworld. I have to do some serious catching up.
Shut up! You watch all the television all the time. Don't break the myth.
Fill episode 1 of Westworld until 5th of June, so it looks like the whole of the season is till 5th of June. But don't wait until then, because you'll have to watch all 8 in the night. But yeah, I mean, I because I've got so much to watch and review, I haven't actually caught up on Westworld at all. Ever since reviewing the season premiere, I think I started the 2nd episode, and then there's always another something that's been released. So instead, I made headways into Devs, which was a strong contender for my best show of the month. It's Alex Garland from Ex Machina, his latest show. Very, very good. Some lofty ideas. Not sure it quite hangs together, but I did really enjoy it, and a daring finale. But the top of the month for me has got to be Gareth Evans' Gangs of London. Gangs of New York.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, had to happen, didn't it? Gangs of London, which is the world's worst title for it. I mean, the amount of people I've talked about on this who have been put off just because it sounds like another generic Cockney gangster Rise of the Footballer style B-movie affair.
Rise of the Foot Soldier, not Rise of the Footballer.
Rise of the Footballer. Rise of the Footballer. Yeah, we're having one of those days.
I'm impressed, Kaz, that you've managed to start to degenerate without visibly drinking on screen.
Yeah, you can't see the drink comes in sideways here, but yeah. Phil, can you just edit that one out?
Yeah, unfortunately, Kaz, we can't at the minute. But I've got to say, I do love your background photograph, the same as what you've done with the other guys there. You make it look like a really badly decorated room. That's spot on, mate. You've picked it. I joke. I do jest. You should see the mess behind me. Right, so that's us caught up. Unless you're going to add anything in there, Steve or Ed.
What, in terms of our new
TV? Yeah.
Our favourite TV, I finally got around to watching Tales from the Loop and thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought that was very, very good indeed. And I've also enjoyed Car SOS because, again, it's got people interacting with each other at a less than respectful distance, which makes it novel and exciting. And it's wonderful to see. I've always enjoyed that programme a great deal. They do a fantastic job. If you don't get hit in the feels when they hand the car back to people, then you clearly have no feelings at all. Yeah. But I have to be honest, the amount of time I'm watching television has been declining almost exponentially. We look at graphs going up exponentially because of worldwide reasons. Mine is actually bell curving down. The amount of time my television is on at the moment is incredibly limited. I'm reading and I'm listening to music. It's 1957 here, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I don't know why.
Ed, there was a pandemic in 1957.
Oh, excellent. Well, it's good to know. I don't know why, because there's plenty of decent television, and the street across the major streaming services, there's some awesome content which people have been bringing up and so on and so forth. But I just, when in doubt, just return to music, and that's been what's happened for me. As I say, the comments from a couple of weeks ago, I'm still having to ration books because normally I just wander off down a charity shop and buy more of them, and I can't. So yeah, paper books are an issue, and someone's going to say Kindle in the comments. I agree with that. I don't have a Kindle. I've got Kindle for the iPad, but just reading the iPad screen for hours on end is not conducive to healthy eye, so I don't do that. So but no, Tales from the Loop and Car SOS, thoroughly enjoyed both of those for different reasons.
I'm with you on the TV thing. There's loads that I want to watch. What I'm finding difficult at the minute is I can sit here at my desk here and do what I need to do, but just trying to sit down and relax, I'm having problems with that at the minute. I don't know why. I can manage it in the cinema room. I think I can manage it in the cinema room because the chairs I have are upright chairs, so I'm not going to slouch either way or whatever. But it's just switching off at the minute, relaxing. And I think the TV is just full of news and bad news and all the rest of the minute, so I'm avoiding that. So and I'm not reviewing any TVs at the minute, so I've got to say I haven't been watching as much as I should, and it's just the big tentpole stuff that I can watch on the projector, which I have been watching recently. Anybody else suffering with that? I mean, Kaz, I hope you don't, because then we're absolutely knackered.
No, I'm all good with TV. Although I did start Netflix's latest TV show, Hollywood, and I just didn't get on with it at all, to the point where I just couldn't even be bothered to review it. It was bad. I lasted about half an episode and thought, this is not for me.
Crikey.
Yeah, and that's really, I give Netflix a lot of slack. But yeah,
Isn't that a new Ryan Murphy show?
Yeah, it just didn't work for me. The cross combination of weirdly awkward humour and kind of goofy characters in a weird juxtaposition where they basically reversed the sexes and had a guy who was having to sell himself to support his lifestyle in Hollywood. It's kind of awkward, and it didn't really work as a comedy.
Well, following on from last week's podcast, I watched The Last Dance, and it's absolutely brilliant. And I know nothing about basketball. Michael Jordan, I only knew who Michael Jordan was because he was in Space Jam and he had a range of sneakers, Air Jordans. I assumed he was a good
trainers.
I assumed he was a good basketball player. It's brilliant. It's absolutely amazing. And I keep wondering, because basically ESPN had a camera crew with them in the 97-98 season. And I don't know what happens in that season, so it's all completely new to me. But I'm wondering, I keep wondering what they shot it on, because it clearly it doesn't look like it. Well, they keep cutting to actual footage from matches, which was shot on crappy SD late 1990s video, but this looks like it was either shot on 16mm or an early version of a high def camera, because the quality is much better when they cut to the documentary footage they were shooting at the time, and obviously they also have interviews with him now. But yeah, Michael Jordan, I had no idea he was so amazingly good. I knew who Dennis Rodman was because he had gone out with Madonna in the early 90s, and again I knew he was a basketball player. I didn't know which teams they play for, didn't know anything about it at all, but it is compulsive viewing, and I can't wait for episodes 6 and 7, which are on 5 and 6, which are on tomorrow night.
What you do find with American sports, Steve, is that if it's footage taken from broadcast, it's usually pretty bad. But I know the NFL have a film group, and I'm sure the NBA do as well, where they actually go out and film stuff. They certainly used to in the 80s and 90s film it on film. I
think it is shot on film because the quality is good, and definitely, I mean, unless they had we're using the kind of, there were high def cameras around then, high def video cameras, because obviously Lucas was experimenting with them on the Phantom Menace. So I mean, they may have been using that, but I suspect it was probably on film. And they have like behind the scenes access, and it's really interesting. And they go back into the history of each player, and also the history of the team. And yeah, it's fascinating. So I recommend that highly. I was recommended to us last week, and I recommend it on. I think was it Mark who was recommending it last week?
Well, someone on the forums.
Yeah.
Recommended it and said you should definitely check it out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird. One of the limitations. I mean, I've been caning Car SOS documentaries which take you away from the weirdness of our current situation are invaluable, which is why I'll probably give this a whirl as and when I can be bothered to turn the television on. But it comes back to the standard fallbacks. Right now, what I wouldn't give for access to some Forged in Fire, which I don't have, or more air crash investigation, which is not necessarily cheery, but does at least definitely not centre around massive pandemics.
I tried to watch Tiger King. I got to episode 4, and I had to give up. I just had to stop at that point because I couldn't stand any of them.
None of them are nice.
No, I just couldn't stand any of them. It started to peak up. Maybe I'll go back. Maybe just because I watched 4 in a row, maybe that was just too much.
There's only 6, isn't there?
Yeah, so maybe I'll go back and watch the next 2, because I want to see the 4th one where they started trying to figure out what happened to the husband.
Yeah.
That's where it really started to improve. So maybe I'll go back. But I gave it a go. But no, they're not likable people at all. None of them are likable people at all. Just quickly go through, see if anybody's mentioning TV in the questions. Normal People on iPlayer comes from Gordon Wheeler. You reviewed it, Kaz, did you? Or was it somebody else that covered that?
No, I reviewed Normal People. I really enjoyed that. It's Irish cast based on... It's not an Irish cast. Irish characters. Controversially, not Irish cast. Based on a best-selling novel. It's a really well-shot, well-directed and superbly acted piece of relationship drama, except without the melodrama. It's not. I mean, everybody should have kind of tangentially, at least, been through this in their youth. It's a very nice exploration of the awkwardness of teen love and then university relationships and everything that goes with it and all the social graces. It's really nicely put together. It doesn't rely on anything extreme or over the top to keep your interest, other than good acting and good scripting.
Okay.
Sex, apparently.
There's a fair amount, yeah. But again, it's done in a way that's... It's not salacious. It's just done in a way that's... I mean, it would be 2 people who are pretty young. I mean, that's kind of how it goes.
Someone's just asked about Run, actually, which I am watching on Now TV Wednesday nights. That's really good.
What did you think of that, Steve?
Quite intriguing. I like the leads. So
I like the leads, and I mean, the pedigree is Fleabag's writer, isn't it?
Yeah,
Waller-Bridge.
Well, she's not the writer; she's the executive producer. But it's another one of the writers from Fleabag is also the writer.
Oh yeah, it's her co-writer.
So it's kind of it's the Fleabag team.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was very odd, the first episode, but interesting enough, based just on the 2 leads and their chemistry. I'm not really sure I was sold into the premise, but I was.
It's nice seeing Donald Gleeson using his actual Irish accent for a change.
Yeah, it was atypical casting, and I think the 2 of them did have some chemistry. So
definitely.
Yeah. And someone's also mentioned Clone Wars, which I suppose, given that May the 4th be with you, it's something we should celebrate for tomorrow. The final episode of Clone Wars is coming out tomorrow, and I think Steve's catching up with Clone Wars, and I'm fully up to date and can't wait to see what happens next. I mean, I
haven't even started it yet.
Tomorrow, also on May the 4th, there's a making of documentary series on Disney Plus about the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes thing they're going to drop as well, I believe.
And the UK launch of Rise of Skywalker, I think.
And that as well.
Yes.
Well, not in the
No,
UK. I think
is
that's
that
worldwide.
Oh, it's yes, worldwide.
Worldwide.
Well, that gets mentioned last because we've mentioned them in the order you should watch them in.
Right, I think we've caught up with TV. So to finish off this week, because it is our first ever live podcast. Now we have had teething problems. Thanks for sticking with us. We've been hovering around about 90 people watching live tonight. Thank you very much for watching in. I don't think I've seen any super chats yet. So if somebody wants to be the first one with a super chat, you've got 10-15 minutes to make it happen. But we have had a donation. It didn't pop up on the screen for some reason. We'll look into that. But 211 Nigel H, thank you very much. £10 donated there. Thank you very much. That is very generous. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, so we're gonna move through some of your questions. So hopefully the guys have been paying attention to the chat window as well as we've been going on this evening, and picking out one or two chats. Or if you want to ask a question now, then now's the time to do it. So, Ed, anything popping out for you?
There was something, and I'm going to have to start copying the comments into a notepad, and it's disappeared all the way. But no, sorry, someone else is going to have to do something whilst I find things.
Well, I'll do one quickly then, because there was. Luckily, he's actually mentioned his name because he's from Greece. He's our Greece watch, viewer, and his name's actually Simon. And now he's said his name's Simon, I can kind of understand how the Greek alphabet works, because I can kind of, okay, yeah, I can see that would be Simon. Hello, Simon. He was asking about whether if you had a 9.2 channel AV receiver, would you go 5.1, 5.2.4 or 7.2.2? Personally, I would go 7.2.2. I think having your speakers behind you is definitely more important than having lots of speakers over your head. What do you think, Phil?
Absolutely, I agree with you there. And that's generally the system I'm running with at the moment. The 7 on the one plane and then 2 above. That's the way I'm running it at the minute. And the reason I go with the 7 is, like you say, that there's just a gap if you don't go with
there's a gap behind you. It's a hemisphere of sound if you think about it. So unless you've got that circle of speakers around you and then a couple overhead, if you've got 2 missing at the back but more overhead, you just end up with a gap behind you, and there's a big hole in the soundstage. So yeah, I think go for 7.2.2, Simon.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, any tips on improving your room acoustics for music? That comes from Peter Thatcher. Probably a good one for Ed as well.
That was what me. This really comes down to how the room has to work when you're not listening to music, because there's nothing to touch use of acoustic paneling at given points. So you can work out where the speakers are hitting the wall. You can either use them to essentially prevent unwanted refraction to the point where you're listening, or to simply dull it down depending on the level of deadening that you want. The catch with this is, even if you stick a picture on them, they're not exactly subtle. And if it's a lounge that we're talking about, then that's not always a given. The problem that we have, and ironically it's something that affects enthusiasts more than anything else, is we tend to over-speaker rooms. One of the more interesting set of comments when I reviewed the Kudos at 7,000 is like, how can a small speaker be worth it at £7,000? In this room, this is all the speaker you'd ever need. We do tend to sort of go, let's get something socking great in there. If you've got the money to spend, then get something big in. There's nothing really to touch setting up a room with a pair of speakers that can be driven to something approaching their sort of full potential than there is desperately trying to rein in a large pair of speakers in a small room. And you've got to bear in mind that 2-channel is, bluntly speaking, we are much more reactionary when it comes to things like room EQ and so on and so forth than multi-channel, although that is starting to creep in. So one of the options, obviously Dirac is starting to crop up in a number of 2-channel products, but honestly, one of the reasons I'm as much of a fan of stand mount speakers as I am is that it allows for them to be run with a degree of, you know, high output that isn't simply overloading the room, and that's something that if you have the option of being able to, you know, choose product to suit, really will have a huge advantage for you. There's no getting around it, unfortunately.
I've got to say, one of the best 2-channel systems I've ever tested in my room, Ed, was a Lingdorf system using.
I've read Steve's comments on that socking great processor he did. It does appear to be an exceptional system. I'd be interested to have a go. The problem I found, especially if you're using analog source, is that it does tend to steamroller some of the character out. You know, for better or worse. Even back when I tested the Arcam SR250, when it did the full Dirac room measurements with my Neat floor standers, it not only identified that there was some bass nodes, but it then decided to try and set to work on some of the less than flat engineered response to the speakers themselves.
Ed,
yes.
That's something that Room Perfect doesn't do. Room Perfect tries to retain the characteristics of the speaker rather than try and just map it to some arbitrary target.
That's
and therefore, so I think you might find that so what it does is, what it's designed to do basically is to eliminate the negative aspects of the room while retaining the inherent characteristics of the speakers. So if you've got a speaker that you particularly like, because of the way it sounds, it should still sound that way. I know my speakers, same as Phil's, are very neutral, so it's not really much of a difference. But if say you had if you loved B&Ws, then that soft mid-range should still be there. So
I'm just
that's the idea.
Right, left and centre, Steve. What can I say? You know, I'm just. I'm afraid this is part of a wider argument about exactly what you are seeking from your system. I fully appreciate, even with the nature of some of the stuff being used for review, that my digital source in particular is utterly free of embellishment. But one of the reasons I've been as fond of the Kudos as I have is that they are accurate, but there is a degree of character to what's going on, and you're either going to love it or find something else at the price which appeals more. But nevertheless, in terms of room tuning, my suggestion would be to go to source. You look to speakers which are not going to overpower the room, and then it must be said that the Dirac and Room Perfect options, depending on budget, they are coming down to sensible prices, and they will allow you to tweak the product and dial out the problems in the digital domain.
Okay, let's see what else there is. No car talk this week from Ronan. I don't want to talk about my car because I then want to go and drive it. And the thing with lockdown as well is I've been buying loads and loads of mods for it because I'm sitting looking at websites all day and thinking, ooh, that looks nice. So I've had to rein myself in dramatically, and I'm trying not to think about the car because it's sitting outside. The weather has been great, the kind of weather where you can get the windows down and listen to that glorious V8. Can't do it at the minute, so I'm trying not to talk about it. New F-Type is nice. The F-Type is a gorgeous car. Even it's one of those, if I could afford it, I would really like an F-Type.
It just couldn't be with a 4-cylinder engine. 4-cylinder
No,
Jaguars.
not the 4-cylinder. I meant the SVR.
But most of them 4-cylinder now. That's the thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, everything's going that way in turbocharged and all the rest of it.
Hopefully, the viewers can actually see mine and Kaz's eyes glazing over right now.
Yeah, but you've been sitting staring at them all evening, Steve. So I think they're well creeped out. Mandalorian has finished in the UK. You know what? I gave up after about 3 episodes. I didn't give up. I just stopped watching it. But if there's enough there now to go and watch in a binge,
they're all there now. There's only episodes.
It's just finished.
God's sake.
Yeah, I'll get them finished.
And season 2, we get Ahsoka Tano in the flesh. This time played by Rosario Dawson. Perfect casting, from my opinion. So brilliant.
I've still got Clone Wars to go through as well.
Well, that's going to take a while. Nigel Henry, hi Nigel, over in Belfast. he asked a question. I'll point this to Kaz because I know you've just ordered Rogue One in 4K
Yeah,
disc.
I mean,
So who can you get it from?
You can get it from loads of places, including places like Amazon. But I got it from WoW HD.
Yeah, that's what I use as well.
It's generally the best place I find. Never really get stung by customs charges or problems because they pay them all, and the prices are reasonable, and it's fairly quick turnaround.
Yeah.
I mean, that's who I've always used.
That's www.wowhd.com.
Yes,
I believe.
fairly simple.
Yeah.
One of the
And that's
Star
a
Wars
recommendation. That's not a paid endorsement.
Unfortunately,
That's a
that's not a paid
recommendation.
endorsement.
Yeah.
When are the Star Wars films coming out in separate releases in the UK? We don't know yet, but they're all out in America, and there's nothing preventing you from getting them separately there, considering there's no region locking on 4K discs. That's just a tag on from the WoW HD thing. And I'll answer the couple of questions that people have asked me directly, which is I haven't seen High Seas on Netflix, and I haven't seen Extraction yet on Netflix. I haven't seen Extraction because I was so upset that someone else reviewed a Netflix title that was good. So I'm now boycotting it, but I will sit down and watch it sometime soon because it looks really awesome.
In answer to History Amazing H, I haven't seen Devs yet. It's on my list to do. I've got Devs, Gangs of London, and Tales from the Loop to watch. But I'm waiting till sort of the regular stuff's finished, and then I'll move on to that.
Still looking through the list of questions here. I'm losing track a little bit. 516, yeah, we've covered that. I feel your pain. I ride motorbikes and they're stuck in the garage. Yeah, motorbikes, you really stand out at the minute, Ronan, if you go out on one of those. I have seen the police stopping quite a number of people on motorbikes. I mean, they could have been going to work in genuine, but I think the view is that any of the motorbikes at the minute, it's usually for pleasure. So I feel your pain there, mate. Absolutely. I know it's an AV show, Adrian, but sometimes we like to bring in our other hobbies. And actually, Adrian, I did see a question of yours that I don't think was answered. Let me just find that quickly. Yeah, it was to Ed, and Ed's not here at the minute.
Just a second. Too much beer.
Too much beer. BenQ TK850 or BenQ M800 for games and movies. I haven't seen the M800. The 850 is an impressive little projector. I think Steve, you've seen it as well. You reviewed that one as well for another publication, didn't you, last year? Nice solid projector. Does everything that you would expect at that price point. Again, it's a DLP. It's a 4K DLP, so it does the quadruple flash. They are getting better at this in terms of the early DMDs they had. If you're using it on a scope screen 6980, you could actually see quite a gap. Bit of light spill at the sides. They are getting better with that. That's not as noticeable now. It wasn't noticeable on the 850. The only thing you have to be aware of with DLP at that price point is the black levels are not great. But if you're using it in a room with light coloured walls and ceiling, or if you are using it with lots of ambient light, then obviously your black floor is raised anyway, and in such circumstances you're probably better with a DLP projector than something like a JVC N5, because it would be so washed out you wouldn't get the benefits of the JVC in a room like that. So they do have their benefits. Usually motion is really good, 3D is usually really good on the BenQs, and like I say, I've got the TK851 set up at the moment. I haven't done any critical viewing on that or measurements or anything like that. That's my work for tomorrow, Monday, once I get the podcast out of the way. So we can update on that next week. In fact, if I get the review done by the end of the week or enough to talk about, we'll talk about it in the next podcast. So I can't give you the side-by-side because I haven't seen the M800. I'm not particularly aware of that model. Are you, Steve? I'm assuming that this is a gaming projector.
I am not. No, I can't really comment. I don't know.
Yeah, don't know that either. Right, Ed, there was a question there from Adrian Califf for you. He's called you Ed or Jonah. Looking to upgrade my Raspberry Pi Rune Bridge, what would you recommend for under 500 notes?
The SMS 200 Neo that I reviewed a couple of months back, provided that you can give it a wired internet connection. It is, I mean, look, annoyed myself by finding that I thought it sounded better than simply running Rune out of my laptop, and I don't know why that would be, other than the fact that it has limited power supply noise because it's an off-board power supply. But nevertheless, let's ignore that as being a subjective area. It's an unconditionally stable, rack-friendly, compact, and exceptionally capable piece of kit that will deliver a really high-quality USB source out to any DAC that you want. The equipment in the rack in front of me at the moment, actually, some of it's had to be patched up. It's often the case that you damage things repeatedly, hot plugging and so on and so forth. There's 2 repairs that I really need to do as and when I can actually get and interact with normal people. Nevertheless, I'm going to tempt fate here. The little SOTM hasn't missed a beat. It is hot plugged a lot because it tests an awful lot of different USB sources and so on and so forth. It just keeps going. It's beautifully made, exceptionally reliable, and if for whatever reason you need to run it not as a Rune endpoint, it's perfectly happy to do that as well. It would be at the moment there's nothing I can imagine that's any better than that. It's really good at what it does.
Okay, one that's popped up here, simple answer, leg extra. What is the best way to soundproof a typical living room if you're in a terraced house to keep the neighbours happy? I've got a subwoofer soundproof mat, for example. Are they any good? Best way to avoid any issues there is invite the neighbours round to watch TV with you.
It's not actually, it's not being facetious. This has a huge benefit on what's going on.
Make good friends with your neighbours if you intend to make noise at reasonable time. The only way you're going to get around the issue of a subwoofer transmitting noise is to have a room within a room and have it completely and utterly decoupled from the floorboards and so on, because bass travels. Bass is a long wave, and it does travel, and it will travel from room to room and house to house. There's no simple way around it. I used to live in a terrace block when I had my first subwoofer, which was a Rel Storm, and I did that. I got to know my neighbours, and I used to invite them round for film nights, and I didn't take the mickey. I didn't overly use it or overly watch too many films at loud volume, and I never got a complaint because they would come round for the odd movie now and again, and if they had the system, they knew I was watching movies, and I wasn't doing it late at night. So that's your options. You know, to soundproof, you need to decouple the subwoofer completely from the room, and the only way you're going to do that is to build a room within a room, and that's just a ridiculous thing to probably try and do in a terraced house. So yeah, unfortunately, that's your only way around things. Steve, have you seen anything else that's popped out before we wrap up?
Just a quick question from Kieran Lockyer. He's asking about the light sensor on the C9, which I'm pretty sure is in the middle, and bottom middle of the panel. Same for the G10. I think that's where it's located. Now LG. So this year's 10 series, there's a light sensor. They've got Dolby Vision IQ, which means it uses metadata when it's in the cinema home mode. Uses metadata to adjust the image depending on the amount of ambient light in the room. LG are claiming that the 9 series also did this, although it wasn't called Dolby Vision IQ because that didn't exist at the time. So basically, I think that what they're saying is that they use the light sensor that's in that TV to also adjust it. Now, whether it's as sophisticated as Dolby's version, I don't know, because it was news to me. But I believe the light sensor is, once again, sort of middle bottom of the panel. So he's asking about soundbar. If you've got a soundbar in the way and it's blocking the light, then clearly that would affect the ability to read the ambient light in the room. I've got to say, I noticed that in order to get it to work properly in a demo that Panasonic were doing, the guy had to hold the torch mode on his phone under in order to activate it because it was in a really big room. So how sensitive they are and how easy it is to change. I mean, I got to say, my room's not the brightest room at the best of times, so it didn't have a massive impact on the light sensor because there wasn't a lot of light coming in the room. It's only got small windows. But I guess if you are blocking it with a soundbar, that will affect it. So you need to get. I think it's in the middle center. That's where it is. In answer to your question.
There's 2 questions cropped up. There's one for you guys about HDR10. which you can have a look at and work out if it's in remotely answerable in the context of this. But someone's just saying, I've got several months of Tidal. How do I make the best use of masters? If you don't have an MQA compatible DAC, and don't worry, because that's far from the end of the world, you can set Tidal to unpack MQA in the settings, which is a little cog icon lurking on the desktop app, not the web app. You must download the desktop app. This will essentially unfold a high-res signal for almost any DAC to use over USB, and suitable products that will give you anything up to 2496 start honestly at about 50-60 quid. If you're looking for something compact, easy to use and reliable, and actually MQA compatible, the AudioQuest Dragonfly Black will give you a good start for under £100. But honestly, almost any USB DAC working with Tidal, unpacking the file, will give you a creditable stab at what the masters are doing.
Okay. Son of SJ's question.
Yeah, Ken Benjamin up in Edinburgh.
Hi, Ken, up in Edinburgh. I love Edinburgh. I really miss Edinburgh. I don't get to see Edinburgh enough these days.
He's watching us on his kitchen TV, Phil, which is about the size, 75 inches, I think. That's
right. I'm a boyhood Hibs fan. I used to go to Easter Road home and away back in the mist of time. So I do miss going up there. Right, so basically what you're asking is that obviously TVs with Dolby Vision, when given an HDR10 signal, is going to go to the base layer, which is HDR10. You put Dolby Vision in a Samsung set, it's not going to accept it, so you're going to get the HDR10 layer as well. So the question is, how much worse is the base HDR10 layer than the television's preferred HDR format? Now, there's a number of answers to this one. Basically, if you're looking at a Samsung and a high-end Samsung, so not the lower-end Q60, Q70, Q80, but the higher up the range, with over 1,000 nits, they should be well over 1,000 nits. They should be okay in terms of they need very little tone mapping. They'll need to tone map if it's above 1,000 nit for the display monitor that the content was mastered on. So the TV would then tone map. The second point is, depends on the tone mapping of the TV in question. Sometimes an HDR10 layer might look better than HDR10 Plus, just because the set with a base layer does better tone mapping than it does with the Plus. And Dolby Vision is the only system where it really is a truly dynamic metadata system. So for every single frame, the TV is being sent what the luminance figure should be. That's a great system from front to end. But if you don't have it, how much better or how much worse is HDR10 layer? I'm going to be honest here, there's not a great deal of difference. And not a great deal of difference, and certainly not a difference that you're really going to notice with that much content. Where you will notice it is in the highlights, peak highlights, where, and a good test for this is if you have the Spears and Munsell disc, you can swap between all the formats, because the demo video has been graded in all the formats, and you can actually swap between them and look at certain scenes and then compare them. And if you're lucky enough to have 2 players, 2 discs, 2 TVs, which I have done, there's a scene in there where it's a piece of metal being grinded on a grinder, and obviously you get the sparks coming off it. And in the highlights, it clips out in HDR10 Plus and the base layer HDR10. In Dolby Vision, it's clear. You can see what's going on in the highlights. There's loads of detail in there. So it's just little things like that. It's not going to be a big night and day difference. And I think people get wound up on the forums because you start looking at things in such detail that, tiny little differences can start arguments where really the arguments don't need to be taking place.
Are you suggesting that this industry tends towards us arguing over unbelievably petty things? Because you're entirely right.
Yes, Dolby Vision is great. When it's done right, when it's decoded at the hardware level, when the master has been done properly in HDR, it can look fantastic. And where it does benefit is with sets that are not quite as capable. So certainly OLED TVs benefit from Dolby Vision because they can correctly tone map and they can bring out the details where they need to be without dulling the image too much. So it's a great system, but it's not a huge difference between HDR10. I wouldn't get yourself hung up on it, to be honest with you, because I've seen some HDR10 base layer stuff that on a Samsung TV that looks absolutely jaw-dropping. So yeah, it's complicated because you have different display technologies, different capabilities, and different systems and how they approach it. So,
it's the very definition of comparing apples with oranges.
yeah. So hopefully I've answered your question there, and that made some bits of sense. Right, we really need to wrap it up because we are now over time. It's the first time we've done this. We do know we had some issues at the start. I do know that obviously the audio quality hasn't been great, but we will look into that. We'll try and get it sorted out for next week. If you're listening to the audio version only, then apologies. One of the recorders has stopped, the high quality recorder. So what you have been listening back to is us trying to make it sound as good as we possibly can. Again, apologies for that. When you move into new technologies, stuff like this happens. But do give us your feedback. Do let us know how you think things have gone with the video. Is it something you're going to tune in on a regular basis? Do you like seeing us on the video? Would you rather just listen to the audio podcast? It's anything like that. Also, thank you very much to those who have donated. It really is appreciated. It helps us basically do more things with the editorial like this and invest in the equipment to do it and that kind of thing and make improvements. So once again, thanks for that. Right, so I just need to wrap up. So before we do, I also need to remind you we have a special guest next week. I've already told him it's on video. He seems to be quite happy with that, and he's usually quite good in front of the video cameras when we interview him on the videos. And that's Craig Cunningham. You will know Craig either as a representative of Panasonic. He was for a number of years and appeared in a number of our videos. Craig's now over at Samsung doing some really important roles with Samsung.
Isn't that the equivalent of going from Man U to Man City? Or I suppose actually doesn't.
No, that'd be
LG.
That'd be LG to Samsung, that one. But yeah, Craig's on the podcast next week on the video call, and it's an interesting time in the industry. So it'll be interesting to get Craig's input on what Samsung are doing and how Samsung are approaching things at the moment in terms of the TV technology and so on. So all I need to do now is thank Ed Selley.
Cue the sun.
Kaz Harlow.
I'm a pretty dangerous character.
And Steve Withers.
Rolling Stone catches the worm. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark AVForums.com for latest reviews, news, and video. Plus, why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you've enjoyed the show. And also feel free to hit that subscription button and bell on the page, like Steve says, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, or if you're even listening to the audio version, please head over to YouTube and give us a like and a subscribe. And hopefully we'll see you for our next, or you'll see us for our next podcast next week.